My dark chocolate cake with peanut butter frosting recipe is easy and delicious. I don't usually repeat my desserts, but this one is so good that I make it at least once a year. The bitterness of the chocolate and the flavor of the peanut butter come together in perfect harmony, making this one of the best cakes ever. So let me show you how to make it. First, let's go over the ingredients for the chocolate cake. Here in this bowl, I have one 15.25 ounce box of white cake mix and one 3.9 ounce box of instant chocolate pudding, 110 grams, to which I'm going to add half a cup of unsweetened cocoa powder as I measure 40 grams, along with half a cup of water, 1 tablespoon of instant coffee granules, 4 grams, along with an extra half a cup of water, half a cup of sour cream, 120 grams, I'm using regular, 3 large eggs, a quarter cup of canola oil or other oil, 50 grams, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 tablespoon of plain white vinegar, and an extra 1/8 cup of water, 30 grams. I always use the same recipe. Last year I used a quarter cup of extra water. This year I'm going to try it out with even less, 1/8 of a cup. So my cake pans are greased and floured off to the side. My oven is preheated to 325 degrees Fahrenheit, so we can get started. The first thing is I'm going to bloom the chocolate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up the half a cup of water in the microwave for about 1 minute until it starts to boil. Then I'm just going to pour it into the unsweetened cocoa and mix it up. That's going to help bring out the flavor. Then I'm going to bring my other half a cup of water to a boil and then mix it with the coffee. Set those aside, and then I am going to empty out the cake mix and instant chocolate pudding, and then I'll start mixing everything together. So I'll bloom the chocolate and make the coffee off to the side, and then I'll bring you back. I just finished blooming the cocoa powder and making the coffee. So just to give you a little bit more detail, I put the half a cup of water into the microwave uncovered on high for 1 minute and 22 seconds. It just started boiling. When I opened the microwave door, there were a few bubbles left, but they quickly dissipated. Then I just mixed the water into the cocoa powder here and kept stirring for about 2 minutes. And then I did the same with the coffee. 1 minute 22, and then I just added it to the coffee granules and stirred. I'm not going to really let them cool down too much. You don't have to wait like 15 or 20 minutes or anything. You can start mixing everything together right away. So like I said, I have my white cake mix, 15.25 ounces, to which I'm going to add 3.9 ounces of instant chocolate pudding, 110 grams. I'm using chocolate fudge, but you can use any type of instant chocolate pudding that you want to. And I'm actually going to start off with the bloomed cocoa powder. I'm just going to pour that in. And off camera, I'm going to scrape so that I don't annoy you. The coffee. And now for the quarter cup of oil. Like I said, I'm using canola. You can use what you want. The vanilla, pretty standard in cakes. And then the 1 tablespoon of 1 tablespoon of vinegar. It's not going to make your cake taste like vinegar. It's just going to make it lighter and fluffier. So I'm going to mix this together a little bit just to help cool everything down. Notice I'm waiting to add the sour cream and especially the eggs. You don't want to add especially the eggs right away after you add something hot because you run the risk of cooking them. So just stir everything together lightly. and then go to your more sensitive ingredients. And actually, this extra water over here, you can use that to help scrape the place where you bloom the cocoa powder to help get the last bits out. Now it's time to add the sour cream and the eggs, because I think everything here has had enough time to cool down. You could mix this by hand, but I'm going to use an electric hand mixer. And now that my batter is fully mixed, I'm just going to pour it into my prepared cake pans. Now that my batter is in my cake pans, I'm ready to bake. I'm going to put these into a 325 Fahrenheit degree oven, uncovered. I will let you know for how long. I just pulled the chocolate cake layers out of the oven. They were in at 325 degrees Fahrenheit, uncovered, for an hour and 5 minutes. So 65 minutes. They look and smell fantastic. And now I'm going to check them with a toothpick so that you can see what they should look like. Now for the peanut butter frosting. Here I have 1 cup of peanut butter, 240 grams, and 8 ounces of softened cream cheese, to which I'm going to add 1 pound of powdered sugar, 3 tablespoons of cream. I'm going to use canned table cream, but you can definitely use heavy whipping cream, half a teaspoon of vanilla, and 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. As you can see, I'm using creamy peanut butter, but I've made this recipe with crunchy before, so either will work. I'm using natural no-stir peanut butter, so you can use whatever type you want. Just make sure there's no or very minimal oil separation at the top. So that means the regular natural peanut butter probably is not going to work. Also, I highly recommend that you go for a brand of peanut butter that lists roasted peanuts as the ingredient, because the flavor is going to be a lot stronger. The first step is creaming together the peanut butter and the cream cheese. I think you could probably do this by hand, but an electric hand mixer will make this a lot easier. Then start adding in the powdered sugar in small amounts, about 1/4 cup at a time. Then blend it in. Be careful not to add too much at once, because number 1, you'll have trouble mixing it in, and number 2, you'll probably get covered in a powdered sugar cloud. Once the powdered sugar is mixed in, you'll see that the texture will be a bit grainy. That's where the cream comes in. Once you add it in, it's going to make it smooth. I like to do 1 tablespoon at a time and then blend it in. I highly recommend keeping a knife nearby so that you can clean out the beaters while you're blending in both the powdered sugar and the cream. This will help make it a lot easier to blend everything together and also reduce the risk of breaking your electric hand mixer, which I have done before. And once you've blended in all of the cream, you'll see that the texture will be nice and smooth. Once your peanut butter frosting is done, it's time to start assembling the cake. Like I said, I would chill your cake for a minimum of 4 hours just so that the flavors can marry and the frosting can harden a little bit. I let mine chill for about 24 hours because that's how my schedule worked out, so I couldn't wait to give it a try. And when I cut the first slice and took the first bite, I knew that my dark chocolate cake with peanut butter frosting recipe was a big success because it was absolutely delicious. First, let's talk about the cake layers. So the cake definitely had a very strong chocolate flavor. I would definitely call it a dark chocolate flavor because it was a little bit bitter because of all the unsweetened cocoa, and the bit of coffee that I added helped bring out the chocolate flavor even more. I tried some of the cake on its own without the frosting, and like I said, it was definitely a dark chocolate cake, but I think that without the frosting, some people might find it to be a little too bitter, so just be forewarned about that. However, with the frosting, the combination was absolutely perfect. Speaking of which, the peanut butter frosting was absolutely out of this world. The peanut butter flavor was very strong, not only because I used a good amount of peanut butter, but also because I chose a brand that listed dry roasted peanuts as a first ingredient. I think the tanginess of the cream cheese helped bring out the peanut butter flavor even more, kind of like how adding a little bit of lemon juice to a fruit cobbler or pie will help accentuate the flavor. I also think that using cream cheese instead of butter was the better call because, number one, like I said, that tanginess helps to bring out the flavor, but also I think that because cream cheese has less fat in it than butter does, the fat didn't compete with the peanut butter flavor. So I think the peanut butter flavor was stronger because I use that lower fat cream cheese compared to butter that has a lot more fat per ounce. The frosting was definitely rich, but honestly, this cake was not overly sweet because, like I said, it was a dark chocolate cake with a lot of unsweetened cocoa powder and a little bit of coffee, which made the cake itself kind of bitter, which was the perfect complement, the perfect background or contrast to the peanut butter frosting. So this cake is a good example of how sometimes things on their own aren't that good. A somewhat bitter dark chocolate cake and a really sweet peanut butter frosting, but when they're combined, they work together in absolute perfect harmony. One thing I did want to point out is that, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I use less water in the cake recipe this time than I have in the past, and I actually like the texture a little bit better. I know it was a fairly small adjustment, but I feel like a little bit less liquid in the recipe might actually be better. And even though this cake was absolutely fantastic on its own, I highly recommend serving this with a good quality vanilla ice cream because just like how that bittersweet chocolate cake and that rich peanut butter frosting go together really well, adding some vanilla ice cream just completes everything perfectly. So, like I said, I highly recommend serving this with some vanilla ice cream. So in short, this dark chocolate cake with peanut butter frosting recipe was absolutely phenomenal. If you've been on my channel for a while, you know I make this cake once a year. Most of my recipes I do not repeat, but this is one I absolutely have to because this is one of, if not my favorite cake, if not maybe my favorite dessert ever. So if you've never made one of my recipes before, I highly suggest you make this the first one because I know you'll fall in love with it. It's definitely a cake that you and your family and friends will love forever. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.